So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar that will feature thought-provoking presentations by interns from some of the world's and India's leading academic institutions, including St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi, Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts, the University of Virginia, USA, and University College London, UK. A little bit about the interns who are going to be making the presentations. These interns representing diverse disciplines such as international relations, public policy, economics, history, and English bring a very unique perspective to the field of underwater domain awareness. Their work explore the socio-political, strategic, and economic dimensions of the UDA. Their projects offer fresh insights into the maritime security, ocean governance, and the blue economy with the intersection of the global policy, historical context, and the communication strategy. Little bit about what the UDA Summer Internship Program is all about. The UDA Summer Internship Program has been designed in a way that it nurtures young talent and engage them with the real world applications of maritime and underwater domain awareness research. Their mid-internship presentations offers an opportunity to review the significant strides that they've made so far and chart out the path forward of the second half of the internship program that they are part of. Besides that, I'd also like to inform that this webinar is part of the series wherein our interns have been making the presentations. We started off with the first set of presentations on 28th of June 2025, wherein we had presenters from three leading colleges of India, including IIT Bombay, IIT Kharagpur, and IIT Madras. In the second slot, we had students from IIT Delhi and IIT Kanpur making their presentations. And today we have students from the liberal arts background who are going to be making their presentations and talking about their projects, etc. Besides, we are also very glad to host the esteemed panel of assessors. Today, we are going to be joined by Ms. Vandana Chauhan, who's a former mayor of Pune and a member of parliament. We are also going to be host Mr. Punos George, who is the executive chairman of the St. Kitts group of professional institutions. Besides, we are truly humbled and delighted to have Ms. Tomo Kawane, who's an independent consultant and a former researcher at the Keio University, Japan. Welcome, ma'am. I'd like to talk a little bit about the structure of this webinar. Today's webinar is intended to be a 2-hour, 30-minute session featuring presentations by our talented interns, all of whom come from the liberal arts background. And the session has been structured into 3 groups. Group 1 features students from esteemed international academic institutions. Group 2 will be represented by students from Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts. And Group 3 includes students from St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. We look forward to the diverse range of perspective and insights during this session. Now, I'd like to throw some light on the guidelines for the interns and for the audience who've joined us. For the interns, please introduce yourself at the start of the webinar and make sure that you're in a space which has good internet connectivity. Respect the allocated time to make the session run smoothly for yourself and for the others as well. For the audience, please keep your microphones muted unless you're invited to speak. And you can always post relevant questions and feedback and keep the chat box alive by posting your comments and feedback in the chat box. I think we will now start with the main part of the event, and I'd like to call upon Dr. Commander Arnav Das, who's the founder and director of the Maritime Research Center, to share the welcome remarks with all of us. A little bit brief about Dr. Das. He's a researcher, maritime strategist, and an entrepreneur. He's the founder and director of the Maritime Research Center, which is working on the unique concept of the underwater domain awareness. Dr. Das has served in the Indian Navy for over 2 decades, and he earned his master's and PhD from IIT Delhi while serving as a uniformed officer. And he undertook several research and development projects during his 7-year tenure at the institute. After retiring from the Indian Navy, he worked at the Acoustic Research Laboratory at the National University of Singapore. With this, I'd like to hand over the stage to Sir to share his comments. Over to you.
Thank you, Nista. Thank you so much. And first and foremost, I think I must appreciate the efforts of our interns. They've done a great job in terms of bringing these projects to a level where we feel proud to present as MRC's work. But I must give due credit to these young interns from all over the world, and also to my team, which has Sridhar, Romich, Shlok, Catherine, of course, who have kind of mentored and guided them to bring it to that. And what I'm proud of is the multidisciplinary work that we do. I mean, you will see a spectrum of different types of projects which our interns and fellows have been kind of putting it, and that has built the body of work that we are so proud of. And I must also confess that the thoughts or some of the ideas that I have, it is these interns and fellows who have really worked hard to kind of mature them to an extent that, even I have learned so much more. I mean, I threw some ideas, but when it was put back to me, my learning also went to a different level. I mean, my talk will be welcome remarks will be followed by Catherine, who will give a broader picture. As Nishta also mentioned, we had a set of technical students, multidisciplinary students, and even some economic students also in the last batch, who looked at the various dimensions of the underwater domain awareness. You all know we focus only on the underwater domain awareness. And now, from a policy perspective and from a socio-economic perspective, the present lot of interns will be covering various topics. So, and I also want to thank the panel which has agreed to come and spend time and kind of assess and give their comments on these projects. So Vandana ma'am will be joining shortly. Kawane ma'am, thank you very much. She's joining us all the way from Japan. And I have spent some time in Tokyo University, so I have very fond memory, and I really appreciate the professionalism and the deep thinking that they have been pursuing, and particularly in terms of ocean research. So we're also will be welcoming George Punu sir. He's traveling, but he has promised that he will join soon. So all of you, thank you so much, and all the best to the interns for the presentation. Nishta, back to you. Thank you.
So much, sir. Thanks for your welcome remarks. Now, I'd like to move on to introducing Catherine now. Catherine is the head of research and publication at the Maritime Research Center, and she has mentored and guided most of the interns who will be making the presentations today. So I'd hand over the mic to Catherine to introduce herself and give an overview of the projects that she guided the interns, or what her project overview of the work that she does at the Maritime Research Center. Over to you, Catherine.
Hi everyone. Good evening. I'm Catherine. I'll be presenting the policy interventions at Maritime Research Center. So it gives me immense pleasure to actually present the plethora of topics and research topics that we undertake at MRC as a part of the policy vertical. So at MRC broadly, we look at three verticals, which is technology, policy, and capacity building. And policy is one of the significant aspect that we look at, because these three combined leads to any proper impact of any intervention. So how do we take these policy interventions forward is what we are going to be looking at. And it's going to be a brief overview of all the different projects that we are undertaking here. As this is a fact which everybody is well aware of, well proven, oceans and rivers are facing climate shocks and resource conflicts, and various vulnerabilities, strategic climate vulnerabilities, etc. And at the face of this, we are facing different crises. One of the major issues that we are facing is how do we harness these ocean resources when our territorial resources are getting depleted, or the conflicts are increasing terrestrial resources. How are we going to now make sure that the growing population addressing the food and water securities and energy securities of these growing bulging populations? How are we going to address that? So ocean becomes one of the glaring answers that everybody is interested in. And we've also seen the repercussions of these advancements in various technologies on the oceans. And how are we going to get those balances in place? So India's blue, and when we talk about India, India's blue economy and its regional leadership, how to fight the hydro hegemony of different nations and how to make sure that there is partnership, there is collaboration, and there is more a smooth flow of resources, energy, and technology and knowledge in this area. So, how do we also create the basis for data driven governance? So, these are all issues that we are facing today, and MRC addresses these gaps by turning scientific research into actionable policies for coast, rivers, and subsea domains by implementing, by making sure that we link the technological interventions, the capacity building, and the policy interventions, the frameworks, etc., into a seamless thread of actions. So, at the heart of all of these interventions lies our ability to combine all our resources, resident studies, all our knowledge, and community engagement and strategic foresight. So, starting off, our work focuses on the climate risk and resilience. So, all of our works, be it sediment management, coastal management, or noise management, all of that we make sure that the climate aspect, the sustainability aspect, is incorporated. The sea level rise, flooding, erosion, extreme weather model into all of it. And for our rivers, mainly Brahmaputra and Indus, the sediment flow, basin-wide vulnerability mapping or mapping of drought, mapping of floods, all inform adaptive water policies. And these insights are important so that they could be fed into the national disaster risk, early warning systems, etc., and for better planning. But these policies are only strong as the people who implement them. And for this reason, we have the 100 Warriors program. So 100 Warriors program is divided into three components. One is for rivers, one is for coastal, and one is for the overall water, looking at the water management part. So the capacity building is done to create trained youth and professionals. And who are these warriors? So these warriors are divided into three major types: the domain experts, the data analytics, and the deployment specialists. Other than that, we also have data collectors, community leaders, and first responders who also get trained to become warriors and who become and this 100 is just an indicative number which can be scaled up based on the scale of our project. So once we train these people, it also helps with making sure that we have the proper means of establishing livelihood and creating a source of upskilling so that we have like a section of people where the livelihood generation can be established. And so the warriors become the backbone for MSP, the UDA outreach and climate monitoring initiatives at these places. So with these trained people in place, our focus extends to governing both coast and shared rivers holistically. So coastal and transboundary river governance have been an important part of our research. With regards to coastal, we have how to make sure that the seaweed cultivation, the fisheries are optimized, and made sure that we are in sync with the digital empowerment of our time, and how that could be taken to the coastal communities. So that is one part of the project. And the other is making sure that we are also doing the UDA-driven studies for Brahmaputra and Indus River basins. So underwater monitoring is not just essential for oceans, but it plays a critical role for these huge river systems where water management in terms of quality and quantity has become very critical issues for the government, the communities, and all the other stakeholders. Other than that, apart from the flow of water, sediment flow is also an important factor. Sedimentation in the reservoir, sedimentation in the coast, even deep sea sedimentation. So all of these aspects are also taken into consideration, and we are making sure that all these aspects are not missed out. So sediment dynamics, flooding, transboundary disputes, climate resilience planning, and conflict sensitive data sharing. So data sharing is also an important aspect because it's a sensitive issue, and even recently during a standoff between China and India, the data sharing between China and India was restricted because of diplomacy issues. So such issues can be, and there are various other um, 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 drawbacks or issues which pertain to these changing geopolitical dimensions. So all of that, if UDA is set as a base and there is some regional collaboration and cooperation, there is a framework to bring these states together. So how do we do that? How can such sensitive data sharing be done without uh, without making without keeping this exclusive and not making sure that it gets influenced by various other dynamics in the region. So to make these governance frameworks equitable and effective, we embed indigenous practices along with the science. So indigenous knowledge is also important to make sure that all our policy frameworks are inclusive and equitable. So we make sure that we formalize the local practices in coastal and river governance. We encourage decolonial co-management models and to bridge the community wisdom with adaptive governance framework. So what we're looking at is make sure we assess the knowledge in the place at present. What are the different perceptions of the changing times of these people? And then what are the actions that they have been taking at the local level, and what are the actions that the government is proposing, and how can we find the synergy? So that is basically the gist of the intelligence knowledge integration. So with strong community foundation, MRC also strengthens strategic and economic governance. So recently we've undertaken plenty of field visits to Maharashtra, Veeraval, Ratnagiri, and even Kerala at present, where we are trying to gauge what are the different practices, what are the different perceptions, and what are the local actions that are in place. So marine spatial planning and submarine infrastructure, this is another policy take that we are undertaking right now. So we are developing frameworks to make sure that we have an MSP suitable for the tropical waters, and and it also making sure that all the economic sectors, all the zoning is done properly with climate resilience in place. So, and other than that, we are also doing the risk analysis for the different underwater infrastructure and the port infrastructure critical for the digital and trade economy. The culmination of all of these work has been our Marine Spatial Planning Handbook, which makes sure that we have put together all the policy, technology, and capacity building initiatives for the marine spatial planning in one place. Where when put together, we can see the blue economy trade-offs and all the factors that are going to be influencing the marine spatial planning, the actual execution. So managing the land and sea use isn't enough. So we also have to tackle the sediment and silt with proper frameworks. So which underpin the coastal and river stability. So for that, we are also looking at the sediment and silt policy and all the economic numbers that are required to justify such a policy. So this is a research-driven policy on dredging and erosion and riverine transport, which uses economic and UDA modeling to create national guidelines. So policy research addresses dredging, inefficiencies, erosion, and climate-driven sediment shifts. So all these elements feed into the bigger picture of economic and strategic uh, framework. So here we have the final leg of the project, which is the geoeconomic, geopolitics, and the blue economy accounting. So here we are assessing the different sectors. We are doing sectoral analysis of what is happening in the major and riverine sectors, and trying to create a framework, accounting framework that integrates the SDG and ESG metrics for investors and governments. And this could help us exploit the resources sustainably in such a way that the climate risk adjusted economic value is properly known and we do not overuse, and make sure that we optimize our use. So, and the geopolitical implications of trade and underwater assets are also properly understood to guide the policy narrative. So looking ahead, our research will deepen and scale these policy frameworks for national and regional impact. To conclude my presentation, I would like to just give an overview of what all we are doing. So frameworks for climate resilient sediment and silt management, standardized blue economy accounting model, transboundary river governance protocols using UDA for data sharing and conflict resolution. submarine cable and critical infrastructure protection frameworks, policy integration of MSP and digital transformation at both regional, state, central, and even in a more decentralized fashion. How can we look at it? And various publications and collaborations that we are undertaking and which is already ongoing and proposed are the MSP handbook, which is going to be published in collaboration with Springer Nature. ICWA, we have already submitted our chapters on UDA and Sagar initiative. UDA for Andamans is also another proposal that we are working on. Silk policy framework with the Maharashtra government. MSP framework is also on the table. UDA for ASEAN is also proposed with RIS and IMO GLONAL. We are also part of the task force of IMO GLONOIS, which is looking at underwater radiated noise. And other organizations we are partnering for publications regarding these policy frameworks with IDSA and RIS. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you so much.
So much, Catherine, for elaborating on all the research work that you've been driving along with the others at MRC. Now, I think we'll move on with the first set of presentations that we have for today. I'd like to call upon Pratna Anand, who's doing a BA in Public Policy and Leadership from the University of Virginia, USA. So, Pratna, over to you. Please introduce yourself and you can make your presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Pratna Anand and I'm from the University of Virginia, and over the course of my internship, I've been working on a policy framework that integrates underwater domain awareness into India's evolving marine spatial planning policy through a tool called Localized Marine Impact Dashboards, or LMIDs. So LMIDs matter for policy because, firstly, India's coastal zones are increasingly vulnerable to climate shocks, ecological degradation, and strategic threats like submarine cable disruptions. But our maritime governance system remains very centralized, sectoral, and extremely reactive. LMIDs are a tool to correct this by embedding real-time district-level intelligence into into the marine policy. They translate ocean data into tangible governance outcomes, bringing national policies to life at a more local level. So I'm gonna explain the policy integration that I came up with. So basically, UDA, or Underwater Domain Awareness, provides the strategic sensing backbone through acoustic monitoring, mapping, and data fusion. MSP then uses this data to guide spatial allocation across sectors. However, there is currently no effective policy link between the two. LMIDs are what I consider to be the missing link. They operationalize UDA insights through localized dashboards and feed them into the MSP process, ensuring policy is informed, responsive, and adaptive. During my research, I identified four persistent policy gaps. Firstly, decentralization is very weak. Districts have little say in MSP despite bearing the frontline impacts. Secondly, UDA data is very inaccessible. It's too technical and very centralized. Third of all, ministries and sectors lack shared marine data sets, causing duplication and zoning conflicts. And lastly, policy making is often very reactive, leaving a low capacity for risk mitigation. LMIDs address gaps via localized access, stakeholder co-ownership, and data interoperability. The proposal that I came up with is that LMIDs are basically digital dashboards that are developed and maintained at the district level. They could be hosted through the Coastal Zone Management Authority, which already exists, so they're not a new institution. Each dashboard merges satellite data, acoustic signals, as well as local reports. The goal is not to create new rules here, but to make existing ones more actionable. They coordinate across fisheries, environment, disaster management, and research institutions. So to make this more realistic, I proposed a phased implementation strategy. First, a needs assessment will be conducted in pilot districts such as Dwarka. Then co-design of the dashboard will take place with organizations such as NIOT and IONCOIS. Phase 3 would involve training district teams and community data specialists. And finally, we scale and institutionalize and align LMID data with state MSP plans and national blue economy frameworks. So LMIDs on something that's standalone. They build on policies that already exist. For example, the alerts and zoning maps reinforce coastal regulation zoning rules that their spatial intelligence can inform the development of the PM Gati Shakti and Sagarmala infrastructure corridors. The their ecological monitoring aligns with SDG 14 and the Ministry of Earth Sciences Deep Ocean Mission. Additionally, I also recommended that creating a dedicated MSP subhead within the 200 crore plus OSMART scheme. This would institutionalize funding for LMIDs as the local operational layer of India's ocean governance system, ensuring they are scalable, embedded, as well as policy backed. LMIDs work and are feasible in the Indian policy context. I say this because they work within existing ministries and mandates that are economically viable using low-cost modular tech built for tropical waters, and socially they empower communities without needing major legal reform. This design also allows for a vertical integration from fisheries to the Ministry of Earth Sciences while keeping decision making closest to the coast. And these LMIDs also help with India's national and global alignment. Globally, they help India meet SDG 14. Nationally, they deliver on Viksit Bharat 2047 goals for the blue economy. But more than just simple box checking, they help make our marine policies work on the ground in real time with real people. So, my final recommendation is that firstly, we formally recognize LMIDs as a part of India's MSP framework. Secondly, we allocate a budget line within the Ministry of Earth Sciences. Third of all, we pilot LMIDs in 2 to 5 districts within the next 2 to 3 years. By formally placing MSP and LMID on support under the OSMART scheme, we operationalize ocean data within existing funding, ensuring LMIDs are supported by policy and finance resources. This isn't just about a new tech, it's about a new way to govern the seas from the shoreline up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Partha, for bringing on the public policy framework with the marine spatial planning aspect of the UDA. That's the topic of your presentation. Thank you. I think we'll move on to the next presentation now. We have Tejaswini Kaktikar, who's studying BSc Anthropology from the University College London, UCL, UK. Her topic of presentation is importance of the UDA framework for the Brahmaputra River. So over to you, Tejaswini.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tejaswini Kaktikar, an anthropology undergraduate student at University College London. And during my internship with the Maritime Research Centre, I focused on the Brahmaputra River Basin, a river that is at once an ecological lifeline, a cultural anchor, and a geopolitical hotspot. In this presentation, I want to take you through the work I've done, understanding the pressures on the river, the ways in which India and China are shaping it, and how we might reimagine its governance through better data and more inclusive systems. So I began my internship with a broad-scale literature review looking at peer-reviewed scholarly work and policy documents on the Brahmaputra River. I then approached my research from 4 angles, the first being water security and how floods, sediment, and water quality are changing. The second being the China factor and how upstream control through dams is shaping flows in politics. The third being India's strategy and how development and adaptation are being balanced. And fourth being river management and looking at conventional approaches and how frameworks like the underwater domain awareness might offer new tools. Throughout the course of my research, I found that each of these threads builds into one another. So let's start with water. The Brahmaputra sustains life across the basin, but the security of that water has been increasingly under stress. Research has shown that climate change has intensified glacial melt and rainfall variability, which makes floods more severe and less predictable in the region. Upstream dams like the Zangmu and the Jiacha trap sediment, reducing fertility in the floodplains and altering wetland ecology. Research has also shown that these sediment shifts have a public health dimension, where arsenic contamination in groundwater is now linked to changes in river systems. So when we talk about water security here, it's not just about availability, it's about timing, quality, and predictability as well, which brings us to the second major factor in shaping the basin, which is so China is the upper riparian and its policies carry enormous influence downstream. The 60 gigawatt Medong Dam announced in 2024 at the Great Bend, on which in recent weeks construction has also started, is framed as a clean energy project, but its size and location close to Arunachal Pradesh, as well as the lack of a formal water treaty, mean that it could be as much a geopolitical instrument as an energy asset. We have already seen water data being used as leverage during the 2017 Doklam standoff, where China simply stopped sending hydrological data to India at the height of flood season. This is also what scholars are describing as hydrohegemony, which refers to using control over water as a form of soft power. India's response has been to build its own capacities, but it has taken a very different shape. India has sought to improve connectivity through initiatives like the Sagar Vision and the Sagar Mala program, expanding them inland and strengthening strategic connectivity in Northeast India. More than 645 crore rupees has been invested in National Motorway 2 to link Assam to trade networks. But these projects have limited ecological foresight and blind spots. They often underestimate the river's volatility, the shifting sediment loads, the erosion, and the wetlands. They also overlook local communities like the missing tribes who have long relied on their own strategies, like building stilted houses, adapting crops to flood cycles, and using the wetlands as buffers. These practices rarely make it into state planning, and even institutionally, the Brahmaputra Board, which should be coordinating basin management, has very limited powers. Overall, the Indian approach is currently very top-down, and there is a potential for a deeply rooted bottom-up approach, which would involve interactions with local stakeholders and indigenous knowledge. And so India's strategy then is a mix of ambition and fragmentation. And this fragmentation is maybe most visible in how we manage floods and river management. Traditionally, flood control in the area has relied on embankments and large structures, but these often make flooding worse by trapping water and intensifying river pressure. Majuli Island is a clear example where erosion is eating away land year after year, displacing entire communities and disrupting livelihoods, while the embankments that are meant to protect them have failed. There is no system to track sediment flows or to provide early warnings that could anticipate such disasters. So the current approach is reactive, just waiting for the next flood rather than proactive. So what could we do differently, which is where the underwater domain awareness. A central part of my internship was studying how the concept of the underwater domain awareness, or UDA, could be applied to a river system like the Brahmaputra. Through my work, I focused on how the UDA's integrated use of acoustic sensors, satellite imagery, and ground-based data could be adapted to the Brahmaputra basin. I explored how pilot nodes at Naxia in Tibet, or Pasighat in Arunachal Pradesh, and Bahadurbad in Bangladesh could track sediment flow and even dam releases in real time. A very important aspect of this approach is that it does not solely rely on technology, but also sort of integrates community inputs, things like flood memory, indigenous warning signs, and traditional land use patterns, so that data is richer and more grounded. In essence, I looked at how an existing UDA framework could be repurposed for the Brahmaputra to reduce information asymmetry and support a more adaptive cooperative governance. So my final recommendations were as follows. First would be to, of course, establish a formal Brahmaputra River Commission for cooperation across riparian states. Second would be to use the UDA tools, like I discussed before, to build a live picture of sediment and flood conditions and share that openly. The third would be to combine these data sets with indigenous knowledge and community-led monitoring for a richer database. There is an incredible potential for a proactive anticipatory governance model rather than just reactive crisis management in the Brahmaputra Basin. This would then involve using things like open source information, like satellite data and dam records, to build our own evidence base, even in the absence of a formal treaty. This evidence base would also then include things like studying how China engages in other basins like the Mekong and the Irtish to anticipate diplomatic patterns, as well as exploring the use of legal frameworks like WTO norms or BRI environmental standards, as well as international water law to then expand this toolkit. The key here again is to move from a reactive crisis management approach to anticipatory data-driven policy. Of course, as with any work, my work had limitations. It was based solely on open source English language literature. I did not have access to upstream Chinese data sets or internal hydropower planning documents, as well as the capability to translate Mandarin language documents. Furthermore, the application of the UDA to rivers is still, of course, a conceptual idea that needs to be piloted. Looking ahead, future work needs to model sediment flows more rigorously, benchmark diplomacy across basins, explore legal levers, and build pilot projects to test UDA nodes in real-world settings. The Brahmaputra is a test case, and it forces us to think about rivers as more than just water. They are political, cultural, and ecological systems, and to manage them sustainably, we need to combine diplomacy, science, and local knowledge. And if we can make that shift, the Brahmaputra could be a model for inclusive, cooperative governance rather than a site of escalating competition. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tejaswini, for your comprehensive presentation about your project at MRC. With this, we've concluded the presentations by the Group 1 members, and now we move on to the presentations by Group 2. In Group 2, we have students from Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts, Pune, who will be making the presentations and they'll be talking about their projects. So first, I'd like to call upon Rajalakshmi Vaikom, who's studying international relations at SSLA, who's going to be making her presentation on the topic. UDA for effective, she's going to be making her presentation on the topic related to the maritime security in the Northeast. Over to you, Rajalakshmi.
Good evening. I'm Vaikom Rajalakshmi, a research intern at the Maritime Research Center and a fourth-year student at SSLA studying international relations as a major and minoring in anthropology and bio. Today I'll be presenting on my research project that specifically looks at the intersection of geopolitics, conflict, and sustainability, water insurgency, and geopolitics in Northeast India. This presentation will explore how water is both a vital resource and a potential priority in the region, and how innovative frameworks like UDA, underwater domain awareness, can offer solutions to long-standing and emerging challenges. These are the contents that we'll be discussing over the presentation. First, we'll look into how the Northeast India is constituted and what the physiographic landscape and geostrategic location refers to, and how the political development of the area began, and essentially how water as a critical strategic asset becomes is an integral part of the livelihoods of the people. And then look at the challenges to the water security faced by the people and how this can be integrated within the UDA framework by using an integrative approach, looking at both traditional knowledge and the modern technology. So we need to first understand how Northeast is constituted. It comprises of 8 states: Assam, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Tripura, and Sikkim. Most people, when they hear of Northeast, they associate a homogeneous identity to the communities and also to the topography. However, it is important to keep in mind that it is not a homogeneous unit, and its diversity is parallel to how we describe India as a diverse country. The region is home to more than 200 ethnic groups who have different cultural practices, and a fundamental characteristics also lies in the cultural and familial ties that often cross national boundaries. As Korean has described, that the border is both an invisible and integral aspect of their social existence. It has diverse sets of, fundamentally, it has diverse sets of physiographic features, which include hilly terrains, riverine systems, plateau, and plains. And it is connected to the Indian mainland through a very narrow stretch, which is only of 22 kilometers, called the Siliguri Corridor, and shares over 5,000 kilometers of porous borders with 5 countries. Additionally, the hostile political development where administrative decisions such as the 1956 state reorganization, where whimsical boundary fixing occurred, led to grievances and perceived subjugation of the local identities. And additionally, the Chinese infrastructure buildup in nearby Chumbi Valley poses a security risk for India. These are very few instances that I have described. However, the political identities which exist in this region is immensely complicated with different demands and requirements. This deeply embedded regional complexity leads to emergence for insurgency and conflicts, and thus leading to thus demanding a multidimensional governance. Looking at this complex political scape, water plays an important role in Northeast India as both as a source of life and as a geopolitical fault line. This is often an overlooked aspect when it comes to addressing the demands of the communities, because whenever we talk of Northeast, we have always focused on the insurgency part, but never at the root causes or the demands that the people have. So through this research, I'm presenting a case that water is intricately connected to the lives of the people and the practices, as these pictures depict. It's integral to their daily and cultural practices. Their basis of livelihood includes agriculture, pisciculture, trade, transport, which are all derived from these water sources. And thus, culturally, water has been an important part of their lives. Thus, while addressing the issues of Northeast, water becomes an integral issue. The study focuses mainly on the study I'm conducting mainly focuses on two riverine systems, the Brahmaputra and the Barak River system. Brahmaputra is one of the largest river and thus also carries the heaviest sediment load. While Barak originates in Manipur, it flows through Mizoram, Assam, and then joins Brahmaputra and flows down in the Bangladesh Bay of Bengal. Basically, is a main challenge with where China has initiated dam building and along the river, and which is a major for water control flow, which might disrupt the livelihood of the people, and also a major concern for the national security. On top of this, pollution from untreated industrial and mining waste, climate change impacts, which have increased the frequency of flash floods and erosion drastically, leading to ecological. Recent years have also the drastic increase in flash floods, which can be seen in news reports, where Manipur and Assam have faced dangerous levels of damages. Further, the study surgeons can often exploit this vulnerability, which can be seen in a study where the floods in the cities affect their intensification of the Mizo-national conflict. The nexus between narcotics and insurgency, another concern which can be seen with these sports, where there has been a major surge in drugs within this riverine territory. So traditional measures have fail to capture the full scope of this risk, especially those hidden in the water domain. This is where UDA framework becomes relevant, and it offers a comprehensive approach to water governance and security by integrating technology, local knowledge, and cross-sector coordination. However, before we dive into UDA framework, I think it's important to also acknowledge the rich traditional ecological knowledge that already exists in the region. Various case studies that I have looked into includes the Boro people's Dong system, which is a man-made community channel having an average breadth of 7 to 15 kilometers to channel water from available sources. The Meitei community's pond dikes for cultivating colocasia to prevent soil erosion and also promote ecological balance, and also the pond management system where in practice in Assam, where coconut trees are planted to prevent soil erosion. With this, I'm presenting a case that any modern intervention must always collaborate with local wisdom and the local traditional knowledge and not replace it. This is where UDA comes in, and with its integrated framework, which unlike conventional models that treat water mainly as a security issue, UDA is a holistic framework and encompasses 4 domains: strategic security, blue economy, sustainability and climate change, and digital transformation. And here's how I'm proposing that UDA can address the core challenges in Northeast India. So to enhance safe growth, and as I've described before, the Brahmaputra and Barak rivers are both transboundary and ecologically sensitive. With increasing instances of flash floods, erosion, and landslides, UDA's integration of river information system for real-time river monitoring becomes vital. It enables real-time data tracking of depth, flow, velocity, sediment load, and water quality information, which is crucial information for early warning systems and disaster response. In a region like Assam or Manipur, where communities live closely alongside rivers, predictive modeling and simulation tools can help forecast extreme climate events and allow authorities to prepare targeted rehabilitation plans in advance, reducing loss of life and livelihood. And to address the security concerns regarding the increasing illicit activities in the riverine terrains, UDA can provide underwater surveillance systems, including drones, acoustic sensors, and sonar technologies, which will allow 24/7 real-time monitoring of sensitive water corridors, which can deter illegal smuggling, unauthorized fishing, and insurgent movements as well. This strengthens border infrastructure and enhances protection of strategic assets and transportation routes that are otherwise vulnerable to sabotage. To addressing the sustainable growth also becomes an important aspect which will boost local economy and ecology. So acoustic remote sensing and sediment mapping, which comes under the UDA, can provide precise data on riverbed changes, aquatic health, and erosion trends, and thus provide data about aquatic ecosystem and its degradation, thus helping better understanding and preservation of the biodiversity which exists in these river systems, and evidently the livelihood of the people. This not only helps preserve endangered ecosystems, but supports more sustainable fisheries and soil management. Such evidence-based ecological intelligence contributes to blue economies, strengthening livelihoods without degrading the environment. Capacity capability building, which is also a very important component of the UDA framework, which emphasizes on bottom-up collaboration. So through capacity building initiatives, which will help promote community training, policy collaboration, and digital infrastructure, the framework can create spaces for direct and joint engagement between scientists, the community, scientific community, policymakers, and local communities. In Northeast India, this translates into digital empowerment, community training, and policy feedback mechanisms that reflect ground realities. Rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all approach, UDA enables context-sensitive interventions that consider the distinct socio-cultural, and ecological features of each state, tribe, and river basin, thus creating a feedback loop where traditional ecological knowledge is not replaced but integrated into the high-tech governance body models. Thus, UDA model encompasses these aspects and the different domains, which negates addressing issues only through one lens. But however, as always, every research, my research also had limitations where I found considerable gaps in data addressing how water domain can be utilized by the insurgent groups as their smuggling routes, or can use these issues to retaliate against the state. There's very little initiative done by the governments to incorporate local knowledge and people into addressing these issues. So future research should specifically investigate how issues related to water have been dealt both by the insurgent groups and the Indian state, and filling this critical knowledge gap is essential for developing evidence-based policies and fully understanding the complex dynamics at play. And moving forward, we must I'm proposing to conduct in-depth research on the aquatic ecosystem degradation and explore how UDA tools, integrated with community knowledge, can help build climate and conflict resilience. I conclude by stating that the Northeast strategic importance is matched only by its fragility. Water lies at the heart of its identity, economy, and conflict. The underwater domain awareness offers us a rare opportunity to look beneath the surface, literally and strategically. By combining surveillance, sustainability, and indigenous knowledge, UDA can help shift water from a source of vulnerability to a pillar of stability. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajlakshmi. Thank you for your presentation. So before we move on to the next presenter, I request the audience to keep the microphones off when the presenter is making presentation. Next, I'd like to call upon Palak Jindal, who's studying international relations at the Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts, to make her presentation. And the topic of her presentation is India's engagement with the IORA.
Hello everyone, I'm Palak Jindal. I'm a fourth year student at Symbiosis School for Liberal Arts, and I will be today sharing my findings from my research on aligning the IORA pillars with the UDA framework to boost regional cooperation and resilience. Starting with IORA, with its 23 member states, it promotes cooperation across 6 pillars, which are maritime safety and security, trade and investment facilitation, fisheries management, disaster risk management, academic science and technology cooperation, tourism and cultural exchanges. However, the implementation varies widely due to the resource gaps and political divergence. The Indian Ocean also faces operational limitations because of ongoing problems, which include maritime insecurity, together with ecological vulnerability and insufficient integrated data structures. The underwater domain awareness here addresses these issues holistically by focusing on gaining a thorough grasp of the underwater environment, which makes it an ideal tool to unify IORA's priorities with practical on ground action. The UDA framework presents a solution that combines oceanographic information with acoustic monitoring systems and coordinated decision models. Applying it to IORA enables alternate interpretations of both regional capacity deficiencies and future developmental possibilities. My research aimed to assess how the UDA could fill strategic and operational gaps across IORA. IORA's 6 strategic pillars. I have mapped these pillars to the UDA framework. Starting with maritime safety, UDA strengthens surveillance and enables real time threat detection, improving incident response. In trade and investment, it maps underwater terrain to reduce navigational risks, making maritime routes safer and attracting infrastructure investment. For fisheries management, UDA supports monitoring fish populations and tackling illegal fishing through acoustic and ecological data. In disaster risk management, UDA's early warning systems help for underwater earthquakes and improve coastal evacuation. It also boosts academic and scientific cooperation by promoting shared research platforms and regional marine science partnerships. And finally, in tourism, UDA protects underwater heritage sites and even enables virtual diving, supporting both conservation and cultural exchange. So the mapping here shows how the UDA enhances IORA's goals through practical tools and shared knowledge systems. I've also took a country specific lens, acknowledging that a one size fits all model doesn't work. Mozambique needs support to address insurgencies in Cabo Delgado. UDA can help through real time surveillance, early warning systems, and a proposed regional maritime coordination center. Somalia continues to battle piracy, illegal fishing. Here, UDA enables satellite tracking, community surveillance, and law enforcement training to build maritime governance. Seychelles, highly dependent on the ocean economy and tourism, needs to protect coral reefs and ensure sustainable fishing. UDA tools like acoustic reef monitoring and smart logistics can support both conservation and trade. Comoros faces threats like cyclones and coastal erosion along with weak marine waste management. UDA can help deploy underwater sensors and while involving communities in environmental monitoring. Bangladesh, with its strong regional ties, focuses on climate resilience and maritime law compliance. UDA complements its Indo Pacific strategy by supporting secure, rules based ocean engagement. And for Singapore, aiming to lead in green port innovation, is already piloting AI based port defense systems under the IORA UDA innovation. Here digital transformation is important through the especially through the marine spatial planning, which is a key to strengthening the UDA framework in IORA. Tools like GIS, remote sensing, and AI help maritime stakeholders manage resources efficiently, protect ecosystems, and reduce conflict. These technologies also enable real-time data sharing and predictive analysis, which improves maritime governance. And most importantly, they help bridge the tech gap among member states and align UDA efforts with IORA's broader developmental goals. But despite these promising alignments, there are several challenges which remain, starting with legal framework across IORA countries, which are still fragmented. Many states lack the digital infrastructure and funds to implement UDA initiatives. There's no unified marine spatial planning mechanism across the region, and public engagement, especially from the youth and local communities, which is very minimal. These gaps prevent strategic vision from becoming a reality. Some of my recommendations for this would be establishing a regional center of excellence for underwater domain awareness by dedicating it to the UDA research and training along with policy development. The center will serve as a knowledge exchange platform to help member states develop their capacity for underwater domain awareness. This can also support the rollout of pilot projects in countries like Mozambique and Somalia, where maritime insecurity and limited institutional capacity demand urgent intervention. Developing a harmonized data sharing platforms to create unified regional platform which connects national maritime databases of all IORA states to improve data accessibility and system integration. This would allow member states like Singapore and Bangladesh with advanced digital infrastructure to support data integration with smaller island states like Comoros. Public private partnerships should be supported because these agreements enable private partners to fund technological developments needed for UD advancement. Public private partnerships are essential to fund marine technology like underwater sensors and smart port security. Countries like Singapore could lead innovation hubs under the IORA UDA banner. Lastly, we must also raise public awareness and participation, organizing marine awareness programs in communities to boost civilian involvement in data collection activities and maritime monitoring operations. Coastal communities in countries such as Comoros and Somalia can play a role in citizen led data collection, environmental monitoring, and marine protection if properly trained and included. This can also be done through integrating community initiatives like the 100 Coastal Warriors thing, which I will be looking upon in my further research. So, in conclusion, the UDA framework allows IORA to move from a broad strategic goals to country-specific operational solutions. And by combining the technological tools with local knowledge and inclusive governance, we can reimagine the maritime cooperation in the Indian Ocean. Thank you.
Thanks, Pala. With this, we move on to the last presenter for Group 2. We have Arushi Bisht, who is also studying international relations at SSLA, and she will be making a presentation on UNCLOS and its implications for India.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I'm Arushi Bisht from Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts, and today I'll be sharing my insight on how underwater domain awareness framework can help operationalize key provisions of the United Nations Conventions on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, with a focus on the Indo-Pacific region. UNCLOS is often described as the Constitution of the Oceans, and it came into force in 1994, providing a legal framework for all marine and maritime activities. It covers everything from maritime zones and resource rights to navigation, environmental protection, and dispute resolution. But UNCLOS, while ambitious and comprehensive in its language, often falls short in implementation, particularly in regions like the Indo-Pacific, where geopolitical tensions, weak enforcement, and environmental pressures intersect to form one of the most globally contested maritime spaces. There is a clear gap between what the treaty outlines and what states are able or willing to do. This is where the UDA framework comes in. By offering the technical infrastructure, sensor networks, and data sharing mechanisms that UNCLOS lacks. Through my research, I have found 4 major operational gaps with which the UDA framework can help bridge. Let's begin with environmental protection, which is addressed in Part 12 of the UNCLOS, that is, Articles 192 to 206. These articles place broad obligations on states to prevent marine pollution and conduct environmental impact assessments. However, these obligations are often vague and difficult to enforce. For example, take underwater noise. Even though UNCLOS defines energy as a form of pollution, it has no concrete rules to limit sonar use or ship noise, which is a major issue in biodiversity hotspots like the Bay of Bengal or the South China Sea. The impacts on marine mammals, reef ecosystems, and even fish migration are well documented, yet the convention remains silent on practical measures. The UDA framework offers a direct solution here. Using passive acoustic sensors and autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, one can detect and localize noise hotspots. By mapping where ship engines and sonar use are concentrated, it becomes possible to introduce speed limits or seasonal quiet zones, turning vague duties into actual governance tools. The UDA also tackles the issue of sediment runoff. For instance, in the Mekong Delta, high resolution turbidity monitoring can track sediment loads from upstream dams, allowing coastal states to understand how activities in other countries are affecting their marine ecosystems. This data can then trigger targeted EIAs, something UNCLOS calls for but cannot operationalize on its own. And when we look at large scale environmental damage, like China's island building and dredging in the Spratlys, which has destroyed nearly 19 square kilometers of reef, it's clear that UNCLOS has no teeth. But UDA, with satellite linked hydrophones and sediment sensors, can at least document and quantify the destruction. That is the first step towards accountability, even when formal enforcement isn't immediately possible. Next, let's turn to Part 5, which governs exclusive economic zones or EEZs and fisheries management. UNCLOS Article 61 says that coastal states must manage fish stocks sustainably and share scientific data. However, many Indo Pacific countries lack the capacity to monitor their waters. Meanwhile, distant water fishing fleets, especially from China, operate with impunity. Illegal, unreported, and unregulated IUU fishing is rampant. The Bay of Bengal alone supports over 4.5 million fish workers, yet its fisheries are severely threatened by IUU practices. These are not just environmental concerns, but socio-economic threats to livelihoods and food security. The UDA framework addresses this by enabling real-time vessel tracking using a combination of hydrophones and AIS data. Even if a vessel turns off its transponder, its engine noise or sonar pings are still detectable in this way. AUVs equipped with echo sounders can also estimate fish biomass and reef health, which is essential for evidence based fisheries management. With this kind of baseline data, regulations can be tailored to fit actual conditions. In practice, the UDA framework makes it possible for countries like India and Bangladesh to collaborate, deploying joint sensor arrays to monitor trawler activity and share findings. This data can then be fed into regional fisheries organizations, building trust as well as exposing discrepancies in catch reports or access agreements. This leads us to the next operational gap. UNCLOS Articles 122 and 123 encourage states in semi enclosed seas like the Bay of Bengal or the South China Sea to cooperate on marine management. These areas involve overlapping interests and high marine traffic, making cooperation essential. But again, these articles are purely aspirational. There is no mechanism forcing countries to share data or conduct joint research. Cooperation remains voluntary and often absent. The UDA transforms this dynamic. It promotes interoperable sensor networks and common data platforms that can link multiple countries. For example, real time data from Indonesian, Malaysian, and Indian sensors could be integrated to form a big picture view of the Bay of Bengal. Regional observatories can use shared hydrophones, turbidity sensors, and even drones to monitor and respond to environmental events such as oil spills or sediment plumes across borders. This isn't just about technology, it's about trust building. By making data openly accessible and jointly collected, states can cooperate even when they disagree on sovereignty. By generating jointly owned data, the UDA reduces suspicion and builds the kind of trust that UNCLOS recommends but cannot engineer by itself. Next, UNCLOS Part 15 sets out peaceful dispute resolution mechanisms, such as the International Tribunal for Law of the Sea, the International Court of Justice, and arbitration panels. But participation is voluntary, and these mechanisms often avoid politically sensitive issues like sovereignty. An example of the ineffectiveness is the 2016 arbitral ruling against China, which invalidated its 9-line claims in the South China Sea. China simply ignored this decision, and UNCLOS had no tools to enforce compliance. Here, the UDA plays a supporting role. It provides an objective, continuous record of what's happening at sea: vessel tracks, underwater construction, and environmental degradation. If China starts dredging on a contested reef, sensors can record it in real time, and this evidence can be used in diplomatic or legal forums. More importantly, knowing that everyone is watching raises the cost of unilateral actions. UDA doesn't replace dispute settlement mechanisms, but it strengthens them by often offering credible science-based evidence. Collectively, these elements show that UDA unifies UNCLOS's domains into a single adaptive governance framework. Rather than treating environmental protection, fisheries management, regional cooperation, and dispute resolution as siloed legal regimes, the UDA offers a common operational picture built on shared data. In practice, this means that one sensor network serves multiple purposes. The same hydrophone array that detects illegal fishing can map ocean noise pollution. Turbidity sensors monitoring river plumes can also flag dredging near disputed islets. This integrative approach overcomes capacity gaps of many Indo-Pacific states that lack R&D resources. By pooling sensor inputs and analytics, even small nations can gain insight. Real-time data sharing also enables dynamic management. Managers can adjust zone protections or ship routing on the fly in response to actual conditions. In climate sensitive regions like the Mekong Delta or coral atolls, such agility is vital. While static UNCLOS prescriptions fall short in a changing ocean, UDA makes governance adaptive by facilitating instant risk assessment and regulatory tuning. Ultimately, by enabling collaborative monitoring and continuous information flow, the UDA framework empowers littoral states to act on UNCLOS principles and not just affirm them, fostering sustainable stewardship of the shared seas even when the political will is lacking. Thank you.
Thanks, Arushi, for your presentation. With this, we've concluded with the presentations of Group 2. Now we'll move on to the first speaker of the Group 3. I'd like to introduce Diya Rao, who's studying history at St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. And the topic of her presentation is marginalization and revival of traditional knowledge in Indian maritime policy.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Diya Rao Jaini, a recent graduate from St. Stephen's College, and I'll be presenting my research on the marginalization and revival of traditional indigenous knowledge as part of my mid-internship presentation here at the Maritime Research Center. Some key features that I'll be touching upon in my presentation are the limitations of my study. Secondly, I'll be moving on to defining indigenous knowledge, and then the primary issues that that come up from this definition, which is the nexus between knowledge and power and a disjunct between policy and reality. And I'll be ending with my recommendations for the way forward. So in terms of limitations, of course, in my research, there is a reliance on English language secondary sources. And secondly, I operate with a broader understanding of indigenous knowledge in that I don't really go into the regional aspects of this indigenous knowledge that I'm referring to. So I essentially look at indigenous knowledge as a larger whole. Now, moving on to the definitions of indigenous knowledge, it is essentially defined as local knowledge, which is unique to a given culture or society, and then of course forms the basis for local level decision making. And this contrasts with the international knowledge system, which is otherwise generated by universities and research institutions. There has of course been wide historiography about the definitions of indigenous knowledge, which I'll be touching upon as well. So Martha Johnson looks at traditional environmental knowledge as being built across generations through groups of people, because of living in close contact with nature. And this then includes a system of classification, empirical evidence, and observations about local environment, and a system of self-management which governs the use of resources. And therefore, we see how it's not just based on observations, wisdom, and folklore, but does have some sort of structure to it. Now, the quantity and quality of traditional environmental knowledge, of course, also varies amongst community members, changing with age, gender, social status, profession, etc. And it is important to acknowledge that it is rooted in the past, but this is not to say that it is not cumulative and dynamic, because it uses earlier experiences to adapt to new technological and socio-economic changes. It gained international recognition through documents like the World Conservation Strategy and Our Common Future, which are reports which emphasize the need to use environmental expertise of local people in managing local resources. Now, sustainable management of natural resources can only be achieved by developing a science based on the priorities of these local people and creating a technological base which blends both traditional and modern approaches to solving problems. Next, Van der Bleikund looks at how essentially ideas, experiences, and information generated either locally or elsewhere, but it's transformed by locals and then incorporated into the local lifestyle. And Chadwick focuses on how the people environment interaction shapes indigenous knowledge, in that stakeholders act in response to complex physical, social, and economic conditions which shape the environment. And therefore, we look at the members of these indigenous communities not as passive receptors, rather as active stakeholders in the shaping of the indigenous knowledge. Now, from this discussion on the definitions, I identified two major issues, which is firstly the nexus of knowledge and power, and secondly, a disjunct between policy and reality. So, in discussing the knowledge and power nexus, we see how, firstly, the objective of discussing this distinction between traditional and scientific knowledge is to A, understand how knowledge is categorized, B, how these categories are employed, and C, the limitations of their use. Now, while traditional knowledge is categorized by terms like local, indigenous, and traditional, all of which connote different emphases, scientific knowledge is associated with prediction, rationality, and testable explanation. So, Mazzocchi notes a tendency to pedestalize modern science and reinforce hierarchies, which exist because of the attribution of traditional knowledge consisting solely of wisdom and stories, and therefore lacking some sort of objectivity and rationality. And therefore, he highlights the need to understand that Western science and traditional systems follow radically different ways of knowledge creation and validation. And therefore, analyzing one using the criteria prescribed by another is very precarious. The possibilities of collaboration between local communities and policymakers need to be further studied to allow for the development of more inclusive and locally informed policies. Next, we look at the disjunct between policy and reality. So, the rise of mechanized fishing, particularly through the use of bottom trawlers, leads to declining fish stocks, which are then further exacerbated by pollution from coastal resorts and hotels. These are all provisions of India's policy to boost its blue economy. On recognizing this, the Government of India drafted the National Policy on Marine Fisheries in 2017, which aimed to address habitat conservation and secure tenure rights and livelihoods for traditional fishers. However, its implementation has been limited by the lack of a detailed action plan and insufficient budgetary support. And these limitations isolate and disenchant local communities, making it almost impossible for them to contribute to policy formulation. Another related aspect to this is that of coastal commons, which are natural resources and spaces which can be accessed by all members of a community. Now, while many legal frameworks have provisions for coastal protection and governance, institutions like the Kadakodi or the Kadal Kodati, which translates to sea courts in Kerala, and Ur Panchayats of Tamil Nadu, are key in determining rules to guide community interactions. Now, with industrialization also extending to coastal land, modern policy increasingly isolated these local institutions. And so, coastal governance, which was once rooted in community systems and traditional knowledge, which aimed to balance ecological security and the claims of different users to this land, is now simply a process to ease the capture of space and resources by a few private companies. And this has been summarized by Dr. Aparna Sundar, who says, and I quote, "Not only do they undermine the traditional rights of fishing communities, but they are premised on the weakening or undoing of hard-won legislations which gave communities some form of protection," unquote. So after having identified these issues, I do suggest some recommendations for the way forward. So firstly, in terms of the co-production of knowledge, this has already been seen in terms of a study in Kerala titled Reconciling Indigenous Knowledge and Modern Scientific Knowledge, which was carried out by the Mangalore Research Center as well as the CMFRI, which is the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute, which shows essentially the scientific rationale behind indigenous knowledge. And some examples that were quoted in the study were essentially that when there is a strong fishy odor in the water, this indicates a large concentration population of fish because of the smell of mucus which is discharged by these fish. And secondly, how jumping prawn indicate a good catch because it shows the presence of predator fish. A second instance where this is seen and the value of this is seen is when is through the work of my fellow intern Varsha Matthew, who through her fieldwork in Cherthala noted how fishermen use stars to navigate before the advent of technology. Now this in itself shows the use of a scientific method developed through years of observation, and also of course an openness and reception to newer technology. Secondly, I suggest encouraging a participatory approach. Now work on this has also been done by the Inuit Circumpolar Council, and the value in this is then to ensure that information is gathered from both sources of knowledge, and the analysis of this information is also done through both these sources of knowledge or ways of thinking. And under this approach, for instance, a fish ecologist and a holder of indigenous knowledge with expertise in fish can work together from conception to analysis of the data. And this essentially entails that knowledge is exchanged mutually between scientists and holders of indigenous knowledge in plain language with regards to the scientific aspect of the project. Third, I note the value in broadening the approach towards indigenous knowledge, essentially in terms of understanding its unique methodologies and objectives. As I noted before, both modern science and indigenous knowledge have their unique ways of operating and formation of knowledge, and these need to be respected and treated as distinct. Fourth, community-based mapping and monitoring, essentially, again, using the community and involving them as active stakeholders in order to ensure that the policies that are created benefit them. And lastly, better archiving and documentation of indigenous knowledge. And this work has been done already by the Dakshin Foundation as well as the Oral History Association of India, not only to give greater legitimacy to indigenous knowledge, but also to commit this knowledge to text to ensure that it is accessible by scholars across the world, in order to make sure that indigenous knowledge now is not just brushed off as a secondary source, but something that can actually benefit and lead to more comprehensive policy interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dia. Thanks for your insightful presentation on indigenous knowledge and traditional practices. It's very apt at a time when UN is going to be celebrating and commemorating the International Day of World's Indigenous People on August 9th, which can leverage the 100 Coastal Warriors initiative, which has been spearheaded by the Maritime Research Center. Thanks a lot. With this, I'd like to pause the presentations for a bit, and we'd have the comments by one of our assessors, Mr. Punos George. A little bit introduction about Mr. Punos George. He's an accomplished engineer, lawyer, and visionary educational entrepreneur with over 3 decades of experience spanning in various industries, including plantation, finance, and higher education. He has served as the executive chairman of the St. Kitts group of professional institutions since 2012, guiding the institution to the top ranks in engineering and management education in Kerala. Beyond education, Mr. George holds leadership roles in multiple firms. His multifaceted expertise and forward-thinking leadership makes him a powerful force in shaping the education excellence. Over to you, Mr. George.
I am very much thankful to my friend Arnab, as well as all the other colleagues, for inviting me to this session. In fact, almost all the sessions which I heard from 340 was very enlightening, and it is actually a world of opportunities which is opening for the global trade and global green economy. In fact, if you generalized way, in India, we have not tapped the potential of the coastal shipping. Even after the enabling regulations have been passed in 2024, and even after the policy support from various ministries, still we are not in a big league with. That is mainly because of the lack of our own flag ships, Indian ships wearing Indian flag, as well as our own robust and seamless procedures in enabling entrepreneurship in this area. And I would like the research to be taken up in that aspect also. I compliment the the trainees who have been doing the research on various subjects, especially in marine biology, because now it is the era of marine farms, and we have a lot of exciting opportunities there also. With due respect to the marine ecosystem, with not only taking from the marine system, but also giving proper guidance to the stakeholders. I think the research will give a lot of research and studies in this area will give a lot of leverage for that. Say, for example, we have a very good ecosystem in our Thoothukudi and that area in which in between Sri Lanka and southern Tamil Nadu, and there are a lot of cultural benefits also, because almost all the villages are depending upon the marine ecosystem, and they are culturally as well as socially connected with that. So it is a very good boost that students from various schools and universities are doing such human leadership and studies into this area. I compliment and appreciate, and please excuse me since I am in traveling in another country, but I wanted to attend this, and thank you for the opportunity, and especially thank you, Professor Arnab Das, also. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, sir. I know you're traveling, but in spite of that, you agreed to join us, sir. Really appreciate your thing, and we'll continue our discussions on this. So much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back to you, Nishta.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. George, for joining us. Now back to the presentations. We have our third last presenter now. We have Mehak with us, who's studying English at St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. And the topic of her presentation is Strategic Narratives for UDA, Utilizing Media and Civilizational Diplomacy.
Hi, I'm Meg. As ma'am said, I'm an English student at St. Stephen's College. I'll be presenting on how strategic narratives can be made and utilized for UDA using media and civilizational diplomacy. So firstly, a narrative is not just information, but a story that shapes perception, inspires action, and assigns meaning. Any narrative that focuses on UDA should emphasize on its multifaceted contributions, such as how ocean is a shared heritage. Because marine ecosystems are interconnected, we all share responsibilities for safeguarding their health. UDA can also help in a secure future by not just focusing on defense, but also on safeguarding maritime trade, ensuring energy security, and preventing illegal activities like smuggling and IUU fishing. It can also act as a blue economy enabler because it can allow for sustainable growth in sectors such as fisheries, aquaculture, offshore energy, and even marine tourism. It can act as a guardian of tropical waters. So now tropical waters face unique challenges and opportunities such as suboptimal performance of conventional sonars. So how UDA can help in the same? It can provide a localized and innovative solution for that. It can also play an important role in being eyes pin at the base for disaster resilience by preventing disasters by giving early warnings for storms and tsunamis, and also focusing on HADR operations, that are humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations, by providing real-time data. Thus, there's an overall need to build public awareness, attract talent, encourage investment, and influence policymaking to ensure that UDA is prioritized. The first strategy could be to directly engage with diverse stakeholders using social media and workshops. This needs to be a 6-step process. We need to understand stakeholders and their needs as well as expectations. We need to modify communication channels to adhere to the same. Transparency and trust building needs to be a long term process. The communication needs to be two-way, so it's not just us who are sharing information, but they're also giving their feedback and reviews through discussions and question and answer sessions. Cultural sensitivity plays a really important role, especially in the South Asian and the Indian context, where we need to use vernacular languages and also focus on visual content to engage with areas with low literacy rates. Expectations need to be managed and sustained over a long term period. So, again, the process needs to be really comprehensive. The first stakeholder group that we can engage with would be policymakers and bureaucrats. This can be done through tailored digital reports, workshops, as well as webinars and so on. And the narrative focus here needs to be on policy implications, economic benefits, as well as how UDA can help in flagship government initiatives such as the Blue Economy Mission. High quality infographics can also be used for the same, as you can see on the image on the right. Scientific community and researchers are another important stakeholder group that can be engaged with using joint publications in academic journals, data exchanges, open data sharing wherever appropriate, exclusive webinars, and so on. The narrative focus here needs to be on technological advancements as well as scientific breakthroughs that UDA enables, along with research collaboration opportunities. Industry and private sectors could be engaged with through business to business communication channels, industry summits both online and offline, as well as compelling UDA case studies of successful applications in sectors such as deep sea mining, offshore energy, and sustainable aquaculture. The narrative focus here needs to be on innovation ecosystems as well as investment opportunities. We can also have a predictable regulatory mechanism that is based on MSP. Fishing communities and coastal populations are yet another important stakeholder group. We need to directly engage with them through localized workshops that are conducted in vernacular languages, community radio programs, as well as short videos that can be disseminated through local networks. The narrative focus here needs to be on direct benefits to livelihoods, enhanced safety at sea, sustainable fishing practices, as well as disaster preparedness through early warnings for natural disasters such as tsunamis and storms. General public and youth needs to be the broadest stakeholder group that we can engage with through social media campaigns on Instagram and YouTube, interactive museum exhibits, school level educational programs, as well as citizen science platforms. The focus here needs to be on, as you can see, acoustic capacity and capability building by telling them about career opportunities in marine science and technology, as well as fascinating facts about the underwater world, so their knowledge is enhanced. Now, besides engaging with direct stakeholders, we also need to focus on media influences to shape public opinion and policy discourse. This can be either done through traditional media such as newspapers and television news, where we can utilize op-eds and concise press releases to focus on UDA's research milestones as well as the new technology that has been deployed. Press interviews on national television news channels can also be conducted with experts who can talk about disaster preparedness, marine security challenges, as well as economic benefits, which are all topics that appeal to a mainstream audience, so the broad audience can be collaborated here. Digital news portals such as online magazines and blogs, specifically the Diplomat and London School of Economics, the South Asia Center in particular, can be used to publish feature articles and investigative pieces on UDA's real world impacts as well as its policy initiatives. Data journalism can also be used to visualize UDA's immense insights. Thus, the goal is to consistently inject UDA narratives into national conversations and frame it as an essential investment for India's maritime future. Civilizational diplomacy for UDA, particularly in the IORA and Indo-Pacific, plays an important role in a narrative strategy here. Now, what exactly is civilizational diplomacy? It focuses on common cultural ties, shared values, as well as historical connections to allow for genuine collaboration. This can be done through joint cultural festivals and maritime heritage exhibitions that celebrate UDA's role in, shared ocean histories, nautical histories, as well as oceanic folklore that can create a common emotional ground for collaboration. Academic and expert exchanges can be facilitated between marine scientists, policymakers, as well as historians. The report that you can see on the right is a project report that is based on the UDA framework and that was recently submitted to the Niti Aayog. It forms a really good example for this. Common narratives of ocean stewardship can also be built using joint educational materials and public awareness campaigns on UDA concepts, modern tools, as well as indigenous technologies, as well as their knowledge and traditional practices. The e-learning modules provided by MRC on the image on the right form a good example of how common narratives can be built to ensure ocean stewardship. Now, the IFC IOR is the Information Fusion Center for the Indian Ocean region. We have a case study on the same. It was built by the Indian Navy in 2018 to allow for data fusion from various sources to create a common operational picture. Its motto is information sharing for a safe and secure IOR. It has international liaison officers from over 28 countries to allow for trust building and personal relationships. Media influence plays a really important role here as it publishes regular reports, conducts workshops, and engages with media to focus on its role on combating threats such as illegal fishing as well as piracy. Now, while it is focused on surface MBA, it is pretty relevant in providing a blueprint for how UDA insights, once collected, can also be disseminated regionally to build trust and a shared understanding through media influences and civilizational diplomacy. Lastly, innovation in UDA narratives and outreach is pretty important to take a strategy forward. This can be done through immersive experiences such as virtual reality and augmented reality to allow people to literally dive into the underwater world as well as engage with marine ecosystems and UDA operations in a truly fun way. Gamification can also help, especially for younger audiences and school students, to allow them to experience ocean health as well as UDA's role in enhancing the same marine security challenges. They can learn about all of that in a fun and interactive way through the use of games. Citizen science platforms can also be used by developing mobile apps to report coastal challenges as well as acoustic monitoring of marine life to allow the public to participate and feel a sense of shared ownership and contribution. Data storytelling and public dashboards can also help to translate complex UDA insights into simplified and interactive dashboards that visualize marine traffic, pollution hotspots, and climate indicators to allow for informed decisions to be made. And that was all about how UDA strategies can be developed through a two-pronged approach of media influences and civilizational diplomacy. I would like to thank you all for your attention.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks for giving the tips and tricks for enhancing the outreach. Our next presentation is on the similar lines. We have Maria Celestina Fernandez, who's also studying English at St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi, and she will also be presenting on the topic outreach methods for community building for enhanced UDA framework. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Maria Celestina Fernandez, a UDA Summer Intern at Maritime Research Center, currently pursuing an undergraduate degree in English from St. Stephen's College. Today, I'll be presenting on utilizing the underwater domain awareness framework in community building. This is all my presentation will include, and I'd like to take you all through each section directly. There's this fact I've heard quite often, that humans know more about Mars than the ocean floor, and it is a sad reality. Prior to this internship, I was probably in the same boat, thinking the ocean is sublime, beautiful, and dangerous at the same time. But now that I've begun to think about the Earth's vast blue expanse in a strategic manner, and the many roles and resources it has in influencing life, politics, security, economics, and can decidedly claim that the ocean is no longer just sublime in my understanding. One of the things that jump-started this change in perspective is the Underwater Domain Awareness document developed, proposed, and promoted by the Maritime Research Center. What is the UDA? To surmise, it is a comprehensive document that encourages multi-stakeholder collaboration across government, academia, industry, and coastal communities, skillfully combining innovative technological solutions and their strategic implementation, while keeping sustainability in mind. With a key focus in the Indian Ocean region, it addresses gaps in technology, policy, and human resource development, especially in tropical waters where conventional systems underperform. To look at the four pillars and to familiarize the framework, the first being blue economy, wherein sustainable use of resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and the preservation of ocean ecosystem health is prioritized. Next, strategic security encompasses a nation's or an organization's ability to proactively identify, assess, mitigate threats in the underwater environment to safeguard its interests. As you can see in the diagram, the third pillar being sustainability and climate change, that involves the management of underwater resources and activities to ensure their long-term availability, ecological health, while climate change encompasses the impacts of a warming planet on the underwater environment, such as sea level rise, ocean acidification, and changes in the marine ecosystem. Last is digital transformation, that involves integration of advanced digital technologies to enhance understanding and management of underwater environments. For immediate and effective community building, we need to look at the frontiers of ocean governance, that are our coastal regions. Coastal populations are frontier stakeholders in underwater activities. Not only do they provide ground level insights, but also hold on to traditional knowledge and local practices that could benefit from modified methods being encouraged. To look at the benefits of community building, first and foremost, to keep in mind is that you curate your audience by sharing your knowledge and providing a space for discussions and thought that lead to action. Community building opens up avenues into trade by roping in industries that deal with ocean resources and related products on the regular. The second avenue being through students and into institutions to impact generations that will carry this framework forward in the future. It would find space in government policies to safeguard and enhance governance on land and underwater by working on the gaps that occur, modifying traditional knowledge to better develop a more nuanced approach in countering difficulties that rise up. To talk about the community building methods that MRC as a platform endorses in the regular, by holding webinars and seminars like the Indo-Japan webinar that was held on the World Oceans Day and featured key research ideas discussed by scholars from both nations. More about this is available on the MRC website under UDA Dialogue section. The second is paper presentations and research done by researchers, interns, staff at MRC, and domain experts who contribute to the UDA Knowledge Center and the UDA Digest, respectively. Third is the workshops, like the Forestry and Capacity Building Workshop, which was a 3-day event that was also endorsed by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Fourth being public meetings with key figures, like the one with Ms. Navanita Chakrabarti, Joint Secretary of the Indo-Pacific and the ASEAN, as you can see in the picture towards the right. Fifth being field visits to discuss the 100 Coastal Warriors Initiative, a flagship initiative wherein field visits were conducted to the coastal regions of Ratnagiri and Guhagar in Maharashtra and Veraval in Gujarat 2024 and 2025 respectively. These visits aimed at engaging with local stakeholders, assessing ground realities, and aligning MRC's technological innovations, particularly the Area Production Yield (APY) tool, in empowering grassroots leaders across India's coastlines through skill development, sustainable livelihoods, and marine ecosystem stewardship. Regional community stakeholders included seaweed farmers, self-help groups, fisher folk, NGOs like Parivartan Foundation, state government bodies such as MAVIM, and private partners including Climac, as you can see in the pictures. These interactions revealed rich community knowledge, but also uncovered systemic gaps in administrative support, technical training, access to infrastructure, and integration between civil society and government programs. The suggested implementations that I have listed that could be useful to build upon the primary initiatives discussed include partnerships that the platform of NDT or Nirdhwani technology brings in. It would help in getting like-minded people on board, and this initiative would involve government bodies, national and international domains, actively conducting joint events with them, which will warrant recognition and visibility. Second being external publications, that would help in getting more input and access through publications in magazines, newspapers, blogs, and other research domains, a project that Mehek and I are currently working on. Diversifying social media plans and interactions, say using expert tweets and current needs or events and public meetings, Instagram to get the youth and enter into mainstream discussions, and LinkedIn as a professional repository of all activities. Another key initiative would be to introduce the e-learning modules as part of university climate change awareness curriculums and promoting small achievable goals and actions that can be implemented by students in schools and universities. To talk about the impact of utilizing UDA framework in community building, let us look at the following pointers. First being strengthened maritime security, that would A, enable real-time underwater surveillance, B, support interagency coordination and a faster response to maritime incidents, C, enhance India's strategic posture in the Indian Ocean region. The second being environmental protection, that would A, promote acoustic monitoring to track marine pollution, habitat degradation, and species migration, B, help mitigate the impacts of shipping noise and offshore drilling on marine ecosystems. The third pointer being sustainable fisheries and blue economy. This would improve fishing population tracking and check illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing. B, support aquaculture and marine biotechnology through precise underwater data. Fourth pointer being disaster preparedness. That would enable early warning systems for underwater earthquakes, tsunamis, and cyclones. B, strengthen coastal resilience through better evacuation planning and infrastructure design. The fifth and last point being diplomatic and regional cooperation that would A, build trust through data sharing and joint research with neighboring countries. B, position India as a responsible maritime leader in the Indo-Pacific strategic space. And to talk about the public access, that these impacts would further serve as fuel to arenas of public access that would undertake A, capacity building, that would establish centers of excellence for the UDA, research, skilling, and innovation. Second, promote academic programs in underwater acoustics, marine robotics, and ocean policy. Three, would involve community engagement through the launching of awareness campaigns, targeting coastal communities, youth, and policymakers, and encouraging citizen science, local participation in marine data collection. The fourth being policy integration, which would embed UDA into national maritime strategies, blue economy plans, and disaster management frameworks. For example, making it a part of the NDCs and the SDGs and to keep a track of achievable goals. An article on the same is also available on MRC's website, as I've included the scan code and the template for it. It would also help to align with international conventions like the UNCLOS and collaborate through platforms like the IORA. Last, I would like to end my presentation by mentioning that community building does not just involve communication. It involves transformation through collective team effort. By engaging communities, we unlock the full potential of the UDA framework and pave the way for a secure, sustainable maritime future. Thank you so much for your time and understanding.
With this, we move on to the last presentation of the day, which is going to be by Varsha Matthew, who's studying economics at St. Stephen's College, University of Delhi. And Varsha is here. Varsha, over to you.
Hello everyone, I hope you can see my presentation. I'm Varsha Matthew and I'm currently pursuing economics at St. Stephen's College, and I'm going to be presenting my research on the blue economy accounting frameworks while focusing on sectoral analysis, methodology comparisons, and some of the expected outcomes today. So as we all know, blue economy in the UDA refers to the use of ocean resources for economic growth, and blue economy accounting is a system that measures the economic, social, and environmental aspects of ocean-related activities with the goal of pursuing sustainable development. So my research objectives that I have been tasked with is to compare and assess leading blue economy accounting frameworks to analyze certain sectoral impacts. This is in the economic and social sectoral domains as well. Lastly, hopefully, to create our own framework or structure after identifying some of the drawbacks in maritime policymaking after referencing to more successful international methodologies. So moving on, I chose two frameworks arbitrarily, but I chose them because they were more all-encompassing and relevant than the others. So two international frameworks that I chose was our generic SDG Life 14 Life Below Water and the OECD Sustainable Developmental Framework. For a quick brief on some of the insights on how each of the methodology works, SDG 14 uses a target indicator monitoring system. There are 10 targets, and attaining this target is measured by 10 respective indicators. Just to give an example, the first target is reducing marine pollution, and the indicators to assess this are the Coastal Eutrophication Index, which measures the potential for nutrient enrichment in coastal waters, and floating plastic debris intensity. Now, the OECD Sustainable Developmental Framework is more economical and finance-based with good social and environmental survey background, but it's used more or less as guidance for government agencies to use when making their own frameworks and policies related to the maritime sectors. Now, both the international frameworks I've chosen can act as good frameworks for comparison or study when referring to our own specific maritime policy, as they're very structurally sound and exist to direct international cooperation towards sustainable development efforts. Now, for India, I chose two projects. One is the Sagarmala program, and the other is the Draft Blue Economy that was released by the Ministry of Earth Sciences in 2021. Now, in my comparative matrix, I have these two projects haven't been finalized and are currently in the process of being prepared, but their progress is covered in the public domain. And using our international methodologies, I have sort of made a comparative matrix where we sort of analyze the targets in these methodologies and compare them to the Indian projects and analyze the drawbacks. Using this, we can sort of compare the drawbacks, compare the gaps in Indian policy and Indian maritime policy. So moving on, some of the gaps that I have actually found in my comparative matrix while making it are very technical. Since all of the methodologies that are being spoken about here are very distinct, there is no unified method for evaluating them across ESG metrics. So this complicates our comparative conclusion to a certain extent. Some of the things that I've also noted is that a lot of these sector-specific frameworks, case in point, the Sagarmala program, don't have strong ESG indicators. And by ESG indicators, I mean some environmental indicators such as marine biodiversity, emissions, or natural capital are not uniformly quantified. Ecological evaluation tools are missing, especially in infrastructure projects, case in point, Sagarmala program. And environmental and social indicators are potentially ignored in these programs and frameworks as well. To continue on with this point, there is a lack of sectoral coverage, and by sectoral coverage, I mean different induced and indirect impacts or aspects haven't been covered in the evaluation. In a lot of economic frameworks, the social metric is also very much lacking. A lot of these policies don't engage in community consultation most of the time and don't include social impact valuation as a part of their assessment. Moving on to the second part of my project is what I'm currently doing and what I'm currently working on, and that is the sectoral evaluation. The 5 sectors that I've chosen are the fisheries and aquaculture, shipping and ports, offshore energy, coastal tourism, and marine biotechnology, as these are the 5 major areas when it comes to blue economy accounting and blue economy in general. So when I'm doing this, I'm looking at sources, looking at broad data from official sources such as the Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairy, Ministry of Ports, the World Bank Blue Economy reports, etc. Over here, there are some major gaps and insights, but I believe over time, with a little bit of work, these can be covered as well. So I'm just going to be discussing some of these gaps. There is really high economic performance when it comes to fisheries and aquaculture, but there is a definite lack of ecological valuation within these economic metrics, as they don't take into account like fish stock evaluation depletion or loss in marine diversities. In most of these sectors, if I'm being honest, a lot of social impact data that has been found hasn't been disaggregated properly. A direct indicator of employment as a social metric will lack the assessment of other social issues like gender equity. In creation of ports and offshore energy specifically, environmental costs are not usually taken into account as they aren't that easily quantifiable. Effects and losses from oil spills, carbon footprint, underwater noise impact all have to be assessed within our relevant frameworks, and from the data that I've analyzed, they usually are not. Now, a problem with offshore energy, especially within the Indian context, is up to this point there's negligible data. As far as I'm aware, India does not have any operational offshore renewables. So comparing this with international frameworks when it doesn't really exist also becomes a problem. Again, tourism also gleans many of the socio-political and environmental issues, just like the rest of them. Moving on, I'm going to be talking about a case study that I've been doing. This is my current focus at the time. So I took this on because I believe case studies are crucial tools for both coastal community understanding and underwater domain awareness, because they translate these abstract concepts that we're studying into local real world relevance. So I've specifically been researching a fishing community in the coastal region of Alapura, Kerala, and I've been mostly making economic maps and zones of their livelihood and their income patterns and seasonal variations. I've been taking interviews with them and documenting their way of living and some of the challenges that they faced. Moving on, I'll be sort of speaking to certain governments and institutions that represent them to see where the gaps lie when it comes to the policies that we speak about and their contribution towards blue economy and other similar things that run in parallel to my work. In fact, all of the pictures that I've used in this presentation as well they also come from this field work or field report that I've been doing, and are a good example of how blue economy UDA awareness are really important when it comes to real world concepts and real world relevance. So let's move on to the plan ahead from now. So after this, we're going to be furthering my research project, and to do that, we'll be deepening the sectoral ESG evaluation. And for that, we'll be making templates of each matrix, and we can standardize the evaluation approach. To do this, we can assign proxy indicators like economic indicators. Economic indicators can include blue GDP, revenue, trade, and maybe some social indicators like job, equity, and livelihood. To standardize our evaluation, as I'd already spoken about before in my comparative matrix, there were gaps when it comes to standardization. Once the sectoral evaluation is done, classification of a system linking Indian maritime sectors to the targets and indicators of internationally sound frameworks becomes easy, and that will be our taxonomy development. And the last step to my research project would be providing intuitive suggestions on Indian policy related to the maritime sector. And for this, I was thinking we could take inspiration from other sustainable production success stories from around the world. And hopefully, by the end of this project, we can come up with a comprehensive framework that can be suited to the Indian context but globally benchmarked. Thank you. This is the end of my presentation. And while studying the Blue Economy Accounting Framework, I found that it tells us what's at stake, but UDA tells us what's happening. And together, I believe they can enable sustainable, secure, and data-driven ocean development. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Varsha. Thank you so much for your presentation. And with this, we've come to an end to the presentation section, and now we will move on to the comments and feedback section. We have with us Ms. Tomo Kawane from Japan. I'd like to introduce you to her and talk a little bit about her. Ms. Tomo Kawane is an eminent scholar and consultant, bridging India and Japan with over 3 decades of lived and professional engagement in both countries. As an independent consultant, she has coordinated disaster relief efforts in Gujarat and advised various government, NGOs, and Japanese consulates on ground level development programs. She served as a senior researcher at the India-Japan laboratory at Kyoto University. Ms. Kawane leads immersive education programs, bilateral policy forums, and academic exchanges at the university. Her unique blend of grassroots experience, academic insights, and cultural fluencies make her a powerful voice on the India-US-Japan cooperation. So I would request Ms. Kawane to share her comments with all of us.
Okay. Thank you, Nishita, for inviting me for comments. Actually, today I'm quite impressed to see very young scholars from different institutions. And I don't know whether you have intentionally planned or not, but ladies, it's quite unusual to find any forum which have so brilliant scholars from the group of women, so which is quite impressive. And another part is I quite liked the approaches done by the scholars to focus on the interactions, intersection between humans and the nature, which is quite important in the age of this climate change. And I would like to say that probably we could have looked into some, how should I say, international agreement aspect, probably to put more focus on that, because that is one of the major drives that we are working on, climate change adaptation, and that aspect could be incorporated. But otherwise, the kind of diverse topics and pressing needs of academics to focus on these issues, that's quite impressive. Thank you so much. Thank you
for your comments. We are very grateful and happy that you could join us at the nick of the time we gave out the invitation and you joined us. So thank you very much for joining today for our presentations. With this, I would invite anyone from the audience if they'd like to speak. I especially call out Mr. R. Chandrasekhar, who is here with us, if he has any comments to share.
Hello, good evening. Thank you, Nishita. And I endorse what Professor Kavani said. The focus should be a little more than, if there's a little more depth, it covers international agreements, they would be very, very holistic presentations. Other than that, I was very impressed. It is very, very encouraging to see young ladies making such outstanding presentations. They're very young. So we should also calibrate our expectations from them. But they did very well. There's an enormous amount of research which has gone in. I belong to a research organization myself, so I watch how elders do their research. But if young children, then the prospects for this country are very good. I'm very, very happy for that. And I thank Das sir for this opportunity to join in. It has been a huge learning curve for me. There are many things which I didn't know, which I picked up from young, bright scholars today. I'm privileged. Thank you very much. Very grateful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, Ms. Kavani, for joining us. And I think the presentations were reasonably good. And the young scholars have done good work. And as you mentioned, sir, I think we have to catch them young because they are the future and they will. So we feel satisfied at MRC that many young people are getting introduced to this domain of underwater. And I think there is significant potential for for growth and prosperity if we take this seriously. So thank you very much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So sorry. I think we'll move on to the last segment and I'll deliver the vote of thanks now. So as we draw this insightful session to the close, it is with great privilege that I propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the entire organizing team at the Maritime Research Center. First and foremost, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed keynote speakers and the assessors for so generously sharing your expertise, time, and perspective with us. Your insights have been truly enriching and thought-provoking. A special thanks to the presenters. Your hard work and research were full on display today, and your contributions made the session very dynamic and inspiring. I would also like to acknowledge the organizing team, the technical staff, and behind-the-scenes coordinators for ensuring everything runs smoothly. we invite you to view and share the images from today's session, which will be made publicly available in a day or two. And once again, thank you for being part of this event. We hope to see you again in our future initiatives. Have a great day ahead. Thank you, everyone.